aspects of things, or a particular incident? What was it that convinced you that independence was the way to go?
I think I came to it pretty slowly over, I could say the course of my whole life. So many little factors. But, I grew up as a child under Thatcher in a single-parent family in a council house. So I really saw the hard end of Thatcherism. And that changed how I was, that formed who I am. And I think that kind of feeling then that Scotland was not necessarily wanted by Thatcher and by that government was kind of something that even as a child I kind of became aware of. And then there was, growing up and, my mum or whoever pointing out on sport that Scots were only Scots when they lost and British when they won. And it was small things like that I think I never considered that it was possible that Scotland was a country in its own right. And it wasn't actually until about 10, 12 years ago, and I joined the Green Party at that point in time, and one of their manifestos, a part of their manifesto was that Scotland should be independent, and suddenly seeing it written down somewhere, it kind of joined together all these ideas that I'd had, and I thought, that is actually something that would be good. But of course at that point in time it seemed like almost like a fairy story, and it was the SNP becoming a government that it became suddenly this could actually happen, and that's when I really began to consider it as a serious possibility and get behind the idea.
So that's interesting. You were in the Greens, but then the SNP becoming the government made you kind of think this was really a goer. So what do you think? Yes, Scotland is a cross-party organisation, although Better Together would say they are as well. But I'm allowed to say what I want, even if you aren't. So I'll say it's the cross-neoliberal party organisation. But how does it work with the cross-party nature of inside Yes Scotland? Does everyone seem to get on well? You've got the Greens, Socialists, and
yeah. I mean, I guess because of what I'm doing, making the graphics that are put out on the internet, I'm very much kind of focused in on what I'm doing, and I actually probably out of the whole of the Yes Scotland team, I probably have the least to do with anybody else because I'm so focused and I've got such a huge backlog of work to get through that I very rarely actually interact with others. It's kind of strange. It's like I'm a little island. But from what I see, there's a really, there's a great sense of teamwork, and I don't know who, I literally do not know who's from what background. Everyone, occasionally something comes out and you go, oh, you might not actually be this or you could be that. It's not, I wouldn't say there's any party politics goes on inside the office at all. I'm not aware of it.
Okay, and to come to the graphics that you're doing, you've done some for Bella Caledonia, and now you're doing them for Yes Scotland. But before we get to your ones specifically, I'll put a link to some of them on the podcast page. But what do you think of it's an interesting area, graphic design, because it's a given almost now that any political poster that comes out from anyone will be pilloried to death within 2 minutes, will be photoshopped to death within 2 minutes now. Like you've got Cameron there, that famous one with the NHS, and then someone puts it on a generator and you can have it a million versions. And to be honest, I've been guilty of doing this myself quite a few times. But these kind of graphics, what do you feel about the quality of them so far in the campaign from any side? And has anyone else's work really kind of struck you as good?
I think it is a very fascinating. Of course I'm fascinated because it's what I do. I think initially, Better Together have got a very strong graphic presence. They've got a very defined style, and I think that's both a plus and a negative because they instantly know their stuff, which means that they're instantly recognisable. But as you pointed out about the camera stuff, it makes it very easy to make alternate versions, let's say, that look like the official thing but are making a satirical take on it. And so I think having such a strong brand as they do, it opens them up. It's much more of an Achilles heel, I think, than anything else. On the Yes side, there is such a wide range of people involved in it and putting stuff out that it's almost impossible to keep a track on just what's going out there. And some of it is, there's inspired stuff, and then there's stuff that's put together in, MS Paint with clip art. There's a whole range of it all. And just seeing that range, I think, is inspiring because it means that people are inspiring each other. So I quite often I can sometimes see a graphic and I think, well, that's a great message. I don't like the colour. I might take that message and make it into my own. And I've seen messages that I've put out there that have been repurposed into other ones. So it's a real kind of cross-pollination, and I think that's a vital part of any art process. So it's really, it's probably the most exciting time for any kind of designer in Scotland to be involved in this.
So is there anyone else's work in particular that you quite like?
I'm not really sure because I think most of the stuff that's going on, very little of it is attached to actual names, and because of the sharing nature of the internet, it's quite hard to trace sources. Let's say, so you see things and you quite like it, but you don't really know for sure who made it and where it came from.
Yeah. Oh.
And that's partly what I've been doing as well. Is I've been putting stuff out there that isn't attributed to me. It just gets stuff out, and it's good because it's not about personalities and who's making it. It's about the message, and I think that's the most important thing to focus on.
So where do these graphics that you create go? Are they going just on different websites, or are they going on flyers and different things as well?
Well, my stuff primarily is web-based. So at the moment, none of my designs have made it into the real world on paper, apart from a few ones I've printed out in the office. So at the moment, that's where my stuff is. The printed material that Yes Scotland makes is a different part of the part of the organisation I'm not working with at the moment. So yeah, so my stuff is completely web based at present. Whether that stays the case or not, I don't know. I'd really like to see some of them printed out, put out there in the world, but that's not something we're looking at this present moment.
Are there any kind of statistics about how many people these things get to? Do you know? I know that's a difficult one. It's a numbers question, but
well, I guess I mean, my personal Twitter, which when I started, I'm an artist and I've been very present online as a visual artist for a number of years now. And on Twitter, I've had a following of a couple of hundred, and it was that kind of, I was following more people than were following me. But over the course of this year, that has reversed, and now I've got quite a lot more followers than I am following. So that's shown that there's quite a lot of resonance. A lot of people are seeing what I'm doing, and I can follow when I put something out and see how often it's shared. And especially if it's picked up by one of the sort of bigger Twitter names, it can get a fairly good reach. In terms of the official Yes stuff, I tend to just watch how it's going through Facebook and seeing how many shares we're getting. And for quite a few of the sort of more considered graphics that I've made, we're looking at sometimes up to about 1,000 shares, and the reach is pretty phenomenal. So it's very encouraging to see that. It gives me a good feeling that I'm actually doing something that is having some impact that people are seeing.
It's interesting how the campaigning has changed because, in the past, a graphic designer like yourself, there would be a meeting, they'd make the poster, then they've got to get the contract for the billboards, then the guys have to go out and put the poster up on the billboards and stuff. Now it's so quickly disseminated, and the next one's on the way as well. Do you think this has changed the nature of campaigning in some ways? Because, I mean, it's a bigger picture because sometimes people like myself who are just always on the internet, we tend to get a bit focused. We forget that there's so many people who are not looking at the internet, the older generations that still get the majority of their information primarily from the TV. Do you think the internet will be the main driver in this campaign, or do you think the TV is still the most important one?
That's a good question, because I mean I am like yourself. I'm on the internet an awful lot, and so most of what I'm doing is on the internet, and a lot, and that's in terms of going back to what you said earlier. It is very immediate, and we can, rather than spending a lot of time with planning out who's right. Okay, this print goes here. We do a poster here, and getting that long process. We can react to something almost instantaneously. I've worked in design for near enough 15 years now, so I can turn stuff around very, very fast. So, when somebody says something online or on TV, of course, we can go, oh, right, graphic out that, and within half an hour we can have something put out there if we choose to. I think the difference between the internet and the TV is something that I've not been directly in discussion about, so I don't really know quite what will happen about how we'll try and spread our message on TV, because I think, like you say, the older generations are more inclined to get their information from TV, and so rather than getting messages through the internet, this is when it gets down to local volunteers, and that's what I've seen. So I've actually volunteered on a local level with Yes Leith, Yes Edinburgh North and Leith, and it is about getting that message to people who wouldn't be seeing it through the internet, because I think that we have got a large presence online. We've got a lot of messages there, but like you say, that there is a section of the population that just aren't going to be online, and that's where it comes down to the local volunteers, and that's why they're so vitally important to this whole campaign, because they can get those messages out to people who wouldn't see it online where our presence is strongest.
Yeah, and that's the next thing I was going to come to, because I know you do some campaigning on the local level and canvassing and whatnot. So how's that campaign going? How are you, first of all, how are you enjoying it? And secondly, what kind of reaction are you getting? Do you think Yes is winning on the canvassing front?
I've been involved with the Yes Edinburgh North and Leith groups since the early summer, and been out, been out leafleting, been on stalls and various things like that. Since I've become officially involved in the Yes campaign, the main campaign, I've had to cut my time back with, unfortunately, with the local group just because of the demands on my time have become too great. But the actual reactions, actually getting out there and doing it, has been really fascinating. And I think anyone who's involved in the campaign and who believes in independence should at least a couple of times get out there on the street and just talk to people, because it really focuses you on what it is that people want, and it connects you to people. It gives you an idea what it's a small segment of the population, but it gives you an idea of how feelings are out on the street, let's say. As a designer, I tend to spend a lot of time on my own doing stuff, and so being out in the street corner and talking to people, I found immensely challenging, and I found it really hard to do at times. But at the same time, it's been really rewarding, because it really does feel like I'm doing something very concrete in a way that the digital stuff, the digital thing, you can be just shouting down the internet, and you're never quite sure exactly what the other side of that conversation is, because a lot of the time it's just people watching, people who aren't commenting, they're just seeing what's happening, and you don't know for sure how they feel about it. But to actually be on the street and talking face to face with people, and whilst your reach is much smaller, you can be talking to 10 people in the morning, it's a much more valuable conversation in some ways, because you're actually getting feedback. And I think that's a vital thing for any of us who are involved in this, is to be out there and just see what it's like to speak to people and find out what are people outside the conversation that we're having online, people outside that, see what they're saying.
So what are the most interesting conversations you've had? Could you tell us about one?
I don't think I could probably tell you about the most interesting one, because it was let's just say it got a bit sweary on the end. It wasn't me.
Okay.
Yeah, Leith is a vibrant place, and people can be a bit, they've got personalities down there. There's been so many. I think the most, I was in, what was it? Leith Festival in the early part of the summer, where I was on a stall for, I think it was a Saturday, and it was a really busy and sunny day, and there's a couple of conversations I had there that were really enjoyable, because most people who are approaching the stalls or whatever, they have questions. I think a lot of people that I spoke to, most of them were probably cautiously for yes, but because of the mainstream presence of negativity, they've got worries. And so maybe subconsciously they're like, I want this to happen. They're worried about their pensions, they're worried about the NHS, their education, all these sort of things, because of all the fears that are implanted by the majority of the media. And so to have a one-to-one conversation with somebody and actually say, the NHS in Scotland being independent since its birth, stuff like that they don't know about, and then you can explain how it's funded, and how, if we remain part of the United Kingdom, how that funding is likely to be dropped because of the Barnett consequences. You can see the light going on people's eyes almost. They suddenly go, oh, and you can see that fear allayed, and having that reaction one-to-one really is powerful, because you think, I've actually implanted an idea there that probably actually is going to have a big difference for that one person. And I had a few conversations like that, and it was really powerful, because you're letting somebody stop worrying, and I think that's a great thing to do for anyone.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm a teacher by profession, and it's what I call the penny drop moment. It's always lovely to see on someone's face that moment when they go, oh, when you can physically see it, and it's always a nice thing, especially if you're the one doing the explaining.
I think often with at that moment, one thing I've noticed is you get the pen drop moment, but you don't have the, oh well, I'm going to vote yes, because people are more circumspect. But you definitely have that moment where they just go, yeah, and you can see it in their head. They've just turned that, they've made that little change, and yeah, it's a great moment.
Well, here's hoping that we'll make a big change next year. How can people get in touch with your local Yes group? How can people join up? Yes, is it Yes Leith? Sorry.
Yes, Edinburgh North and Leith. They have a website which is edinburghnorthandleith.net or yenil.net, and you can find out more information about the local group there.
Okay, and so thanks for coming on, Stuart. That's been great.
Great, thank you for having me.
So that was my conversation with Stewart Bremner, and I hope you enjoyed that. Just to say, I've already got another podcast recorded, so we'll have another one out for you soon. And as usual on the Scottish Independence podcast, the guest gets to choose the tune, and this is what Stuart chose. So I'll speak to you next time.
Fog, horn, I said leg, horn.